Falcon employs a hierarchy for organizing the various elements of a sound. It should be familiar to those who have some experience programming or tweaking sounds in other high-end samplers, but people who are more used to just selecting presets may find it a little daunting. In fact, even inveterate tweakers might find the complexity a bit confusing at first glance. That complexity is the source of Falcon's power and flexibility, but it can also take a little getting used to at the outset. For this course, I'm going to assume at least a little familiarity with the basics of how synth and sampler sounds are put together. But just in case, for anyone who may be coming to Falcon as a complete newbie in that regard, this video will provide a very brief background on the layout and organization of synths and sample-based instruments. If you're already well-versed in the world of oscillators, key maps, modulators, and the like, you can probably skip ahead to the next video, where I'll start going over Falcon's specific layout and approach to organization. But for anyone who thinks they might benefit from a little background, here goes. Falcon generally follows an organizational template that's usually referred to as subtractive synthesis, a way of organizing the elements of a sound that's traditionally used in analog synths and sample-based instruments. Of course, Falcon's architecture is much more complex and layered, but that's a good place to start. Traditionally, synthesizers and sample-based instruments organize the various elements into several sections. There's a sound source, sound modifiers, and a final output stage. This is the actual audio pathway. Additionally, there are modulation sources, which are control signals that are applied to controls in the other sections to alter the sound in various ways. The sound source in an analog synth is an oscillator, which generates periodic waveforms that are then further processed in the other sections into playable instrument sounds. In a sampler, the sound source is a collection of recordings of individual notes, samples, from a real instrument, arranged across the keyboard into a key map. Traditionally, the sound modifier stage is a filter, most commonly a low-pass filter, which shapes the tone of the raw oscillator waves. For samplers, this may be used to dynamically change the tone for more expressive response. The final output stage is an amplifier stage that sets the level of the sound. Selected controls in all of these sections can be modulated by other controls, both internal and external. For example, the keyboard is an external MIDI modulator. It modulates the pitch of the sound source to play the standard keyboard pitches. In a sampler, the keyboard triggers the individual samples assigned to the various keys. When the sound source is a raw filtered oscillator, envelope generators that modulate the amplifier and filter are triggered from the keyboard and shape the level and tone of each note. Effects can be generated by routing other modulators to various controls. An LFO, low-frequency oscillator, outputs subsonic waves that can periodically modulate oscillator pitch to create a musical vibrato effect, or amplifier level to create a musical tremolo effect. Other modulators can be used to generate other musical effects or special effects, and the modulators themselves can be modulated by other modulators, including external MIDI. A simple example is the mod wheel on a keyboard used to control the level of an LFO, letting the player control the strength of a programmed vibrato effect in real-time performance. More complex sampler instruments may include multiple layers of sounds, each with their own sound sources and complete sets of controls. The terminology used to describe the specific organizational levels in different instruments varies, and terms like layer, part, and program may refer to different levels of organization in different brands and models. Obviously, we'll just look at how Falcon labels things. Many larger instruments also include onboard effects, and even a mixer to handle patches that include multiple sounds, like a patch that layers piano and synth sounds, or a drum kit that includes multiple kit pieces. Falcon follows the overall layout I just described, with an oscillator section for its various sound sources, and several sound modifier sections. As with other high-end instruments, there can be multiple stacked layers of those basic elements, and it includes effects and a mixer as well. Falcon's organization gets a bit more complex because it allows a sound programmer to apply modulators and effects at several different levels of organization, not just at the lowest or highest level. This offers excellent flexibility, but it does make it a little harder to keep track of things in complex sounds, to reverse engineer factory sounds, or even to make basic tweaks to an existing preset. But with a decent understanding of both basic instrument architecture and Falcon's specific architecture, you can eventually get a good handle on Falcon's way of doing things. Next up, we'll look at Falcon's organizational hierarchy.